So you guys ready to learn a little bit about AWS Amplify? So has anyone here used Amplify before? Okay. There's actually three Amplify libraries. So there's the CLI, command line interface. Then there's an Amplify library that you connect that has like connections to APIs, all the other stuff AWS offers. Mainly used to control your APIs, things like that. And there's the React component library, which gives you things like authentication. Well, both those libraries give you authentication, but it gives you components that you can use to log in and stuff like that. Let's see here. Let me get this plugged in. Is that the? Yeah, there we go. All right, so what I've got here is I basically have the same repo in two locations, so we can see how it works. I've got a completed version because I want to wait 20 minutes for this thing to build. So what I'm going to do is walk through the Amplify CLI, which allows you to connect directly to your AWS account and deploy different serverless features such as API gateways, AppSync, which is a GraphQL API, Cognito authentication services, S3 buckets for storing images or whatever you want to store, sound files, whatever. You can deploy your whole site to hosting using it. And I believe you can add in something they call a CloudFront, which is like a content delivery network, which will allow you to sync in your URL and manage. You can basically sync up your whole site through this process. So let me pull up everything. So I've downloaded this repo here, which is something I just put on my GitHub account. We can link to it later, which is based off a course on Udemy. And so I'm also syncing this up to Stripe to process transactions as soon as I get logged into Stripe. So you can see what's happening. And this is the application right here. So you can log in as it allows you to be somebody that can list products, like a storefront like Amazon, where you can have your own like storefront, sort of like Amazon, list products, whatever, and then you can be a customer and you can buy products from it. Is how it works. So we'll go through like the functionality and stuff like that. But first, let's start with. So that's the completed one. So this one has two APIs. One is a GraphQL API. One is just a regular API, REST API. It's got authentication, so it's managing user data, credentials, generating tokens, so people can sign in and track user interactions. It's got a Lambda function, which I don't know. Are you guys familiar with those? What that is? Yeah. So it's for those that aren't, it's basically like just a server that spins up and runs some function you deploy to the cloud, and it spins up when you need it. Otherwise, it doesn't do anything. And then storage, that's an S3 bucket, so that's storing images. Like you see right here, this image for React is actually stored in a separate S3 bucket. So that has a lot of usage for different, like stores, or you want to manage, I don't know, like customer uploads, images, Instagram, anything like that. You can just assign buckets and they can upload data, and then it brings it in externally. So let's start with, so we got this repo here, right? And let's start with, we got to first init it. So, well, first you actually have to configure it, and you give your a private key, and you basically give your AWS keys, which I'm not going to do here. But so you have to init a profile. You have to configure a profile. So after you configure it, you can init it. You can init this project, and that should. Here we go. So first, it's going to ask you like what ID you're using. In this case, I'm using Video Studio Code. What kind of project you're using: Android, iOS, JavaScript. So it's giving the options of what you're doing. With JavaScript frameworks, so we've got a lot of frameworks here, Angular, Ember, Ionic, React, React Native, Vue, none. So we can go with React. Source directory, so like if you for some reason are using a different directory for your file storage, then you can change that, but I'm not in this case. And build directory, same thing if you're building to some other directory for some reason. Usual React stuff. And then what's your build command, npm run script build, so I'm using create React apps, so that's like the standard, all the standard stuff, same here. So do you want to add a profile? I believe we say yes, and then I have a profile already created, which has all my keys for AWS, which I just call testing. So we're going to add that profile. But at work, we have a whole bunch of profiles we can select from for different, because we have different accounts like dev environments, production environment. Well, we don't ever go directly to production, but like dev, a bunch of different types of environments. So we have different profiles we can select from, and it'll push obviously this stuff to the different accounts. So it's going to initialize a project. That might take, I don't know how long it's going to take, but it might take a few minutes. But what it's going to do is create a bunch of files. So I'll show you in the other project here. Let's see if that finished. Yeah, that one. Okay, that's pretty fast. So it created this Amplify thing, and it gave me a bunch of resources, basically. So it's giving me role IDs, things like that, so that it can connect with the AWS account. It also created this Amplify folder. This Amplify folder contains not really anything yet, but it's going to contain a whole bunch of stuff when we start adding resources. So let's say Amplify add API. So what kind of API? This app uses a GraphQL API, and assume everyone's familiar with GraphQL or some idea what it is. I'll kind of go over it because you have to provide a schema, so I'll just go through that real quick when we get to it. So you got to provide an API name, which I don't think really matters too much, but let's call it test. So do you want to use API key or Cognito? We're going to use Cognito identity pool for managing access to this API. And then this allows you to set Cognito configurations. In the case of if you already have an existing Cognito profile or using like some kind of federated identity provider or something like that, you're probably going to have to just manually add Cognito to this and not go through this process, because it doesn't really allow you to add or you could create it. Depends on what your stage. If you're just starting, you can just create it, add what you need to it after it's created. If you already have something set up, you're going to have to manually install it. This won't work for Cognito. So default, and that's just going to use an email and username to log in. It doesn't use like OAuth or Google or Facebook or anything. And do you have a GraphQL schema? We'll say no. Do you want a guided so this is a guided schema creation. So it basically says, are we using like a simple to-do list type schema? Are we using a blog one-to-many relationship or fine-grained access? I have a schema built already, so I'm just going to, doesn't really matter, because I'm going to overwrite it. Do you want to edit the schema now? Yes. So just create a whole bunch of resources on the left-hand side there. You'll see backend, create API, and then a test is the name of the project. Probably should have named it something else. It's kind of confusing now, but looks like we're doing testing on it. So it created this schema. And this is not a real GraphQL schema. What this is a schema used to build the GraphQL schema. It also builds all your, it builds everything. It builds, well, I'll show you when we build it, but actually I'll show you in the other project. I'm not going to build this. It'll take about 20 minutes. Let me copy from the other project as well. Where is this thing?
Andrew? Mm-hmm. I've got a couple of questions. You want to save them for the end or shoot for
let me put the schema in, and then we can kind of go through the process of that. Let me just find it here real quick. right, so let's walk through this real quick here. So this is the schema for this project. So how this works is you have these decorators like market, app model. It's obviously a model. Searchable, that actually creates Elasticsearch for this particular thing. Well, first of all, these models, each model is going to create a DynamoDB table to map up with this data type basically. So the DynamoDB table, you're going to have a table called market, or it's going to be market and a whole bunch of randomly generated characters or something like that. But it's going to exist, and then that is going to then connect a Elasticsearch to the market, so they can search that table in DynamoDB with Elasticsearch. So it's pretty, I mean, that's pretty powerful. So you automatically, just from the schema, get a whole bunch of, you get DynamoDB tables generated, you get Elasticsearch generated, and then if we go down further, we can see auth right here. So this auth is connecting to Cognito, and what this does is says allow owner. So what that's doing is there's going to be a owner reference in the DynamoDB table of the product. So each product is going to have an owner, somebody who, right here, owner string, and that's going to be the person that created the the product, and it's going to record their ID. So then it's only going to allow that person access to edit that particular item. And then we've got some other, oh yeah, this is important too. So we got this thing called file, which is connected to a S3 object. So this is going to map to your S3 object bucket region key. So that's your, any S3 object you have, basically it's mapping this to the product. So you can, any files stored in S3 object are connected in relationship to every product on your store that would have something uploaded. So you get multiple objects, multiple S3 buckets, whatever you want, and it all map up in your API. So you can just pull all your data out in relationship to your product. So to have an automatic relationship created there. And then we have, this is the user. You can also control queries, like what types of queries can be generated. In this case, we only want to get, we don't want to list query. Mutations. So you can say, this case, we don't want to delete mutation, we want to create update, so you can't delete users. They're going to exist forever. Subscriptions, no subscriptions in this case. And it will generate all these queries, mutations, subscriptions, everything when you run the command. And then the last thing is connection decorator. So this in GraphQL, it's a graph, and it has edges and nodes, right? So connection connects a two-way connection from two nodes, basically. Like if you have this is orders connects to, what is this connecting to? Order, so user, there's a connection between users and orders. So it goes both directions. So users have orders, orders have users. They're connected to them. So you can look it up either way. And the rest of the stuff is pretty, like shipping address, pretty standard orders. Nothing magical there. So what you do, so you create this schema, basically, and we'll just continue. Press enter to continue. So now it's added, and it has so it just built out functions, has a function thing, resolvers. So these resolvers are what connects the database to GraphQL API. So you have database connections with each resolver. Like it's just all in this case, it's NoSQL, but you could also connect to SQL databases as well. It's a feature they're going to add in very shortly to allow you to connect to RDS. So you can just, it's like querying a database and it returns. Like say you get say you want to list all the markets. It would just be select star from markets, for example. Or the NoSQL equivalent, which is, I don't know the commands for that, but it does it for you. And then, what else did it create here? Should have, yeah, created a folder here, GraphQL, in the source folder. So what this does is, so you have all your mutations, right? So this automatically generates all mutations you can have, automatically generates all queries from the front end viewpoint you can have, and all subscriptions. So it's all created, boom, right there. You don't have to think about it, do anything. It exists. So then, let's see, we're going to mirror this other one. So this other one has I need to add storage, that's an important one. So same thing. So you say add storage. This is S3 bucket I'm going to add. So we can do NoSQL or basically content means S3. So just going to leave it that name. Leave it that name. Only authorized users. Yeah, we only want authorized users to be able to see images. Do we want read and write? Yes, we want read and write, and that's it. So you just create a bucket that only authorized users. Well, it outputs a file down here. It's basically AWS has something called CloudFormation, which is basically code as infrastructure. So you're defining the resources you want. So it's creating these CloudFormation files. So when you deploy, it builds out all these things in the cloud. Basically, all you have to do what's called a push, and you push it up to the cloud, and it builds it all for you. So the resources are not created yet, but it's defined all the CloudFormation files at this point, so it can be created. And then we've got to, keep doing that. And then I have a Lambda function to process the orders on Stripe. So when a transaction goes through, I have an API gateway. The API gateway calls a Lambda function, which sends the data to Stripe to process the order, and it's done as part of a Node.js function because we don't want that data on the front end being passed around. So let me just add that real quick. Oops. So we want REST. I believe we want to call, say, Lambda or checkout. And you got to provide a path. We want to create, so you can use an already existing Lambda function. If you have functions you're using for other projects, you can redeploy them or create a new one. I'm just going to create a new one. We'll call it checkout. Keep the same name. Function for Amazon DB. Nope. Serverless expression. So we want a serverless expression, and we're going to edit it. So there's the Lambda function right there. So it provides the scaffolding basically for all your REST methods you would hit. So you get the get, you get the post, you get the put, you get the delete. So you can just come right in here and add whatever code you want. So it's basically, add checkout, do some function, and return some response. In this case, we're going to already have the function here, so let me just open it real quick. Order Lambda. Oh, it's under function. App. So I'm just going to copy this in. So in this case, we're only doing I believe we're just doing a post request because we're just trying to post data to Stripe so that we can do transactions. Yeah, post right here. So we're posting, and we're chaining a couple functions. Charge handler, and then when the transaction goes through, it sends an email informing the users that informing the purchaser and the seller that transactions went through. That's what it's supposed to do. And then I've got to add a couple things here. What else? Package.json file. I'm missing a couple things. I'm using a couple packages, so I just have to add those in. I'm using .env and Stripe. Oh yeah, and then I'm using .env, which is you have it in .env file, and you pass in like data you don't want other people to see, such as also allows you to change for environments. Like I have an access key for Stripe, different access keys for different things, and an admin email, so those all get passed in from the .env. And then what's the last resource we need? So I think that's actually all of it. So then I would, so now that we've got all this in place, oops, I gotta hit enter, sorry. Restrict API, yes, we want to restrict authenticated users only, definitely. We want them to only be able to write to this resource. Nope, no, no, and this is add another path, no. Okay, that's added the details to the CloudFormation file so we can build that, and then you do amplify push to provision the items in the cloud. So it's going to take a while. So it's saying here's all the items. They all are going to be created. Do you want to create them? And I'm not going to do it because I already have a whole project built, so I don't really need to have tons of resources on my account. So if we go in, see this project has been built, and if we go into my AWS account, we are going to see, look at the DynamoDB first. So I don't have any other DynamoDB tables in here except for this project. So we're going to see that, or it looks like some chat stuff. I don't remember what that even is. But so here we go. Market, order, product, user. Those are all resources created by this. And then we've got Cognito, identity provider. So if you go in here, so to create a user pool, it's one of these two. Don't remember which, but we can just come in here and look. That, I don't think that's it, but I think it's the other one. Yep, so I created these are the two user accounts I created from the app, so they're right there in the back end. It also creates API gateway and also creates an AppSync version. I don't really know that I need to show all that, but that's just showing that like it's creating all the resources. And so here we have, I'm signed in as one of the accounts. So let's just go to the home page here. So we have, so I have two users that each created a marketplace. One's AWS, one full stack development. So if you go into, I'm signed in as one user, so I can go to the other user. And so there's this React course, and I can go, oh, let's buy a React course. Whoa, get rid of all that crap. So Stripe allows you to 4242. It knows it's a fake credit card, and it doesn't like stop you from putting it through. So you can just do all. There's also, I have a test account for Stripe, like it's test enabled, so it's not real transactions. But 4242, that's like the number to use to test. So we'll just do a transaction. All right, went through. Should we get an email alert here any second now? So I just heard the email sound. So I got an email from the transaction. So yeah, it's working. And then also because this is GraphQL, it has real-time updates. So hold on, so I can go in here and create a course, right? So let's go in here. So this is the marketplace that I own, so I can actually add things to it. So I want to make, I don't know, a Node.js course, $20. And so I'm going to add a photo. So right here, this is, that was S3. So it's going to upload this. Let me do a shipped, because it's going to make it so you have to add shipping data. So we got this course here. I'm going to add the product, and it's success. So GraphQL subscribed to it, so it sends a response. And now you look here, and real-time updated, it's added. And you can edit in real time, like I could say Node.js plus, I don't know, something goes with it, serverless, I don't know. So So we update that right there, boom. And that's because of GraphQL's, the way the GraphQL API works. So yeah, so basically you can deploy this whole application in, I don't know, like didn't take me that long to get all the resources together or anything like that. Once you have an app, it's going to take you longer to figure out how you want to make the app than to build all the back end and everything. So yeah, I mean, or you can take a repo off GitHub. You want to test something out, you can just build it, build a back end real quick, and the application's going to work as long as you know the data model. So yeah, any questions?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're. Anyway, so you started out with a React app that was already built. It looked like
Yes, I
from
already
what
made
you
it.
wanted. You had a React app, and then you ran Amplify.
Hmm.
And is that something you downloaded from npm or?
Yeah, let's pull it up real quick since. So this is Amplify CLI.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, it's just npm install global Amplify CLI.
Okay. And
Yeah.
then this thing was asking you
Yeah.
questions up front, like where is your source code? Where do you want me to build?
Yep.
Then when you finally run it, it does some analysis of your source code.
Let me show you the code. Actually, I forgot about that part. It's probably important to see that. So to implement this, you still have to implement. There's two other Amplify libraries, which I'll show you. We got AWS Amplify, which is not the CLI, it's a library, and then we've got Amplify React, which gives you components. So we go to like just the app file, the base app file. All right, so let me minimize this so we can see it. All right, so we got so you see here AWS Amplify React. I'm importing Authenticator. That what that does, I'll just show you real quick. So if I sign out, this is what it does. So if you're not signed in, that's what you get. You can't see anything else in the app. And so that's what Authenticator does. Um, then we have Amplify theme. That's just basically controlling how it looks, the colors and all that kind of stuff. Um, and then we have AWS Amplify. So the React thing is components. AWS Amplify is a library. That's how you connect to APIs, S3 objects, authentication. So a lot of stuff like that. I'll show you how I'm doing, and GraphQL. So we got the API coming in here, right? And we also got auth coming in. So those are two key ones. So we come down here and we say, okay, get user data. Auth connects to Cognito, identity provider, and then it says get current authenticated user, and then I'm chaining a bunch of stuff here. So I'm chain, then I'm setting state of the user basically, and then on hub is also part of AWS, and that's also part of authentication, and it's checking like for tokens and things like that are being passed in, and it's saying is somebody signed in, signed out, whatever. I'm not going to get too far into that. Like you can spend hours and hours just on Cognito and how it all works. And then we get down here and we got API, GraphQL operation, get user. So get user is coming from GraphQL queries. So it's a GraphQL query, which Amplify provided called get user. So all I have to do is grab that, come down here, and then get user input is basically it's an ID. I'm getting some data off basically the sign-in data is coming in from Cognito, and I'm pulling out their some data called sub, which is their ID, passing the ID in there, and then GraphQL is finding that user based on looking up that ID in the Dynamo DB table and returning that user's data is how it's working. And then, yeah, and
So
then
you
you get,
kind of know ahead of time that you're going to be building an Amplify app, and it's not that you're just building an app you don't know yet where you're going to deploy, and then at the end you say, I'm going to use Amplify to deploy this. That's going to involve some rework if you take that approach, it sounds like.
yes, I mean, first of all, you need to kind of spec out like what are you building, what data types do you need. That's the first step. Then once you define your data types, then I would define my schema. The thing is though, this is easily extendable. Like if you, GraphQL is very easily extendable. If you decide, oh, I want to have a new type of related products, you just add the type in there, say build related products, it'll build your queries, mutations, subscriptions. Now you got a related products thing, and you can even tie into, in the back end, there's all kinds of machine learning stuff and whatever, and AWS, and if you get into that, you could like use that to analyze your data and find out all kinds of what's selling, what's not selling, populate your, you do all kinds of crazy stuff with it. Um, Also, Amplify connects to chatbots, so you can implement a chatbot in your app, and it's actually a component that's a chatbot based off Alexa technology, and it can talk to you and everything. Um, and let me go through this a little more. So this is the app, and then the other major thing is a product. I'll just show you how easy it is to get some of this data in here. A product. So we got this product, right? You know how I show there's an S3 object stored in GraphQL to provide images for the different products. So what this does, I'll have to find the. So we have Amplify React, so we have an S3 image component, right? And so let me find it down here. Okay, so S3 image. So all I'm doing, I'm getting this key out of the GraphQL query and giving it to the image key. S3 object already knows the data is already stored from Amplify of which S3 bucket I'm using, stuff like that already has that data. So it's just saying, oh, get that key and retrieve that item. And that's all you got to do. And there it is. And so, yeah, it's like super easy.
That and the S3 image component, it's from the AWS Amplify library.
Yeah, right. AWS Amplify React.
Okay, that looks pretty handy. Do you have to deploy using Amplify if you're using that library for
No, I mean, at work, I'm having to manually configure. I'm not really running Amplify because we have a whole lot of way more. We're not just doing like a simple app. We have a lot more complicated authentication, and it's like very locked down and stuff like that. So we can't just like deploy things like that. Plus, we're using like a, deploy pipeline, and just a lot more complication involved. So I've just manually configured the files.
Okay.
But yeah, so I can still use S3 object though. I just have to. We're setting up a GraphQL API that we're building ourselves, and we just have to relate the S3 objects to other data. And as long as I get the 3 points that matter, which are the key, the bucket name, and the region, I can pull any object of any bucket, and if it has a relationship, I can say, okay, get items related to this item or this data type, and like you have a Facebook feed or make it however you want. Yeah. Oh yeah. One other.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you develop locally on anything? Are you doing any local development?
Well, this is all running locally. I mean, this is
Well, I mean, you
local
will
host.
spun up a bunch of AWS resources.
Well, yeah, I'm
So you're
not.
saying you have to spin up AWS resources to develop? Like you can't, you're not, uses DSL to build a GraphQL schema, which then gets loaded into AWS.
Yes, I'm not. Yeah, I'm not using like
Okay.
local mocks or anything like
Okay.
that. I'm using.
Is there a way to like that S3 thing with like .env, like, is there a path to like have this as a way to spin up resources when you want it, but also to be able to run it locally with.
Yeah, I mean, you could definitely. I don't know about the S3 object, how it would work for putting images in it or not. I haven't tried it, but you can mock API calls and things like that with like with you just I have like some config on some stuff at work where it says if it's local, then use some other route, which is a local route. Then if it's on the, because I'm not really connecting to our production to any of the real environments because it has to go through a whole build pipeline, so I'm like not directly fed into it. So I just have like a sample set of data that's I do like a API call. You can tell the route to hit, and it's hitting a local route, and that's it. It returns the data. So it's returning just a JSON object that's a sample of the data that I'm going to get in the real API.
Okay.
So you can do things like that, especially API gateway. It's pretty easy to do that because it's just REST. But same thing with, I haven't tried it with the GraphQL stuff, but thing about that is you didn't have to make mocks for every single type of GraphQL thing you're expecting to return. And I almost feel like it'd be easier just to spin up a sample environment and populate it with a little bit of sample data and just do it.
I guess that's really the heart of my question. So your
Yeah.
iterative development, because you just came in and you're like, here's the code, boom,
Yeah.
spin it up. But now you're like want to make change that you just redeploy, redeploy, redeploy.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, yeah, you can redeploy and just push it up and it'll just say update. Like if you want to change the Lambda, you could redeploy it
Oh yeah,
whenever
if
you
you're
want.
like chaining GraphQL.
Yeah, if you want to add a new data type or something like that, you can redeploy it without an issue. This is more useful, very useful if you've got like a proof of concept or something like that. You just want to bang it out, try it out real fast, see if it works. Or you have an app you want to try out, and it's like you just want to like you don't want to spend 2 years building an app. You just want to get something going and see if people like it. Like that's what it's for. If you want to build like a huge system that already exists and turn it into this, you're it's going to be a little more. I mean, anything like that's more complicated. It's not that simple. But GraphQL is definitely like I'd say the way to go for any new system is way just more useful, scalable. The fact that you can create relationships between data so easily from a bunch of different APIs makes it very powerful. Like you could say, let's create a relationship between the weather, Google Maps, and the news, or something. You can just create random things and find out data. Oh, there's when the weather is colder, we have all this stuff happening.
I got a question.
Yeah.
In this specific application using GraphQL, the interfacing of GraphQL, that's all handled by AWS Amplify, correct?
Yep.
Okay. Um,
Yeah. Let me pull that up. So I was actually before I get on that, I was going to show you just this last thing on authentication. So there's Authenticator. Um, so I was just going to show that real quick. So this is, how it's showing the sign-in screen here. That's a that's just a thing called Authenticator. So I'm saying if no user, return Authenticator, and that's it. It returns Authenticator, and that's this here connects to Cognito. You can connect from your dev environment, from local any environment. You can connect directly to Cognito. Um, you just have to create different app clients, it's called, for every single endpoint or source point, such as local, dev, prod, whatever. It has to be a different app client ID. So that's the only thing that would change. And you can manually set those as well. And you can, set your .env file to detect what environment you're in, things like that, and then have it change the client ID dynamically based off that as well. So yeah, so then for the GraphQL queries, do I have one on here? Probably an app. So let me get that one. So yeah, so it's API.GraphQL, and then it's got GraphQL operation, and that's going to basically translate this register user mutation into whatever format is needed when it gets sent up through the GraphQL API, and it's going to input this. Let me pull up my GraphQL so you can see how it matches up. Pull up the schema here, or not the schema, there we go. So what was I doing? So register user. So let's find that one. Should be in here somewhere. There it is. All right, so it's mutation register user. So it's got a variable called input of type create user input. And this is the actual function, and the takes this variable input into it. And it returns this. That's how GraphQL works. So it's returning these things. This is actually what goes into it. So when you take this, it's taking this variable input, and it just goes through this whole thing. So the variable input goes in here, goes in there, gets put to the back end, and then it returns all the data that it just saved, and that's how it works. And that that's the I mean, it's got a little magic going on there, things like that.
it seems like there's a lot of abstraction going on. Theoretically, API can just have a fetch resource. It can be abstracted even more. to the point that you wouldn't even know that GraphQL was actually going on under the hood, right?
Yes, theoretically you could. Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they just do that because there's different API routes you can hit. Like you can hit API gateway, which is REST, or you can hit GraphQL.
So AWS Amplify actually has both, and it's using both.
I'm using both.
Oh, okay.
So I have so I have GraphQL for most of it. Then the transactions are processed through a REST endpoint called process transactions, and that runs a Lambda because I want to run a Lambda function.
Like a Stripe.
What's that?
For Stripe.
Yeah, for Stripe, because I don't want my front end to be running Stripe transactions. And so it just sends the data to that Lambda. That Lambda runs a function and gets data back to it, and it's supposed to store that data then in your DynamoDB tables.
Cool.
But I haven't implemented that yet. But yeah, that's what it's supposed to do. So, yeah, any other questions?
Well, I can see how the multiple profiles can come in handy. When you're developing, you might choose a certain set of resources, and when you push to something that you're going to be sharing with other people, then you might push to another set of AWS resources.
Yeah, and it's very common for companies to have multiple accounts. You do that because you would have like your production account. You wouldn't really let anyone access. You're just going to access through deploys. That's the only way to access it. And then you might have a sandbox account where you don't care what happens, so people can just screw off. And so that's part of it. And so you can have, I don't know, whatever, tons of profiles. Plus, you might have profiles of different types of access, um, such as admin, or you might just want developer access, or there's a lot of different things why you'd have that. And yeah, I mean, also you could have your personal account, and you could then share it in a company environment as well. So yeah, multiple profiles do come very handy. There's even ways where you can have refresh tokens, and it links to your refresh tokens, so you're constantly getting new tokens for your account, and Amplify will just link to that location, and so you don't have to deal with copying and pasting tokens or anything like that.
Just curious on the AWS website. I went through the configure thing just to update all my credentials and everything. And
Mm-hmm.
is there a quick start on there or a tutorial on the actual site, like kind of to represent some of this stuff that you just talked about today?
There is no quick start on AWS.
No quick start. Okay.
There's only a long start. But I mean, there's a lot of resources on like Amplify specifically.
Okay.
I would say look up courses on that. AWS is like a beast. It's just like there's no
I guess I
way.
haven't amplified though. Okay.
Yeah, there's no way you're gonna know all of it. But you can specialize in certain things. Like, thing is, if you're deploying this type of format, also this type of hosting, you're pretty much all free tier until you get like a huge amount of traffic, and then even then it's super cheap.
Okay.
I think the most expensive thing might be the S3, but no, the most expensive thing would be your domain,
Okay. Right.
and that's like 50 cents a month.
Hmm.
Like I'm hosting a site or hosting something, it costs me $1 a month. So yeah, so it's like because the lambdas only spool up when someone hits it.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously you have like thousands of transactions, it's gonna be running a lot. But if you are brand new and starting out and you have like 10 transactions, that's your free tier till I think you get like 100,000 transactions or 10,000 transactions. I don't know what the number is,
Yeah.
but it's like a lot.
Oh, very cool.
And then the S3 bucket is where you're actually gonna. I don't have hosting on here, but you just say amplify add hosting, and it deploys your application to an S3 bucket. And an S3 bucket costs basically nothing because your app's going to be like a few megabytes. So um, yeah, it's just almost free for that. And so your main costs are literally going to be running your CloudFront DNS stuff like that. So it's gonna be like $1.
What about the database?
What's the DNS
It's
that kills you?
databases are also pretty cheap. Well, the dollar's nothing.
I know, but if you get a month.
I don't know. It's still free. I don't know what the free tier is in the database stuff like that, but there's a certain. I mean, it's DynamoDB tables. I I'm assume they charge if you exceed some quantity of data or something like that, but I really have no idea. Even then, I don't think it's that expensive because once you get that much data, hopefully you're doing something that makes money and it's not going to matter.
I got a question. You mentioned earlier that you can you said you can optionally deploy your app onto AWS. You don't have to use S3. That's what I was going to ask. My next question is: you set up your source folder and your build folder.
Mm.
How does what does Amazon need that for? Is that just for the app hosting? It'll upload your app to
Yes.
Unlisted. I guess you have to provide it, so they sort of want you to do S3 hosting as well.
Yeah, you can do a deploy. I don't remember the exact command, but it was basically a way to deploy your app.
Right.
And you have to add hosting, and then you deploy it, and it will upload your files to it. It's supposed to upload your files to S3 bucket.
Right.
I haven't tried it on my personal account. I tried my work account, and it didn't succeed. But my work account has a lot of lockdown, so they probably not allowed.
You can use AWS Amplify, just the app, the API portion of it, and you can have your actual app hosted elsewhere.
Yeah, theoretically, yes. I mean, I recommend integrating Cognito into it. It's a very good identity provider because you need security no matter what. And once you do that, the thing is with Cognito, you can lock down your whole API, so they can't even access your API endpoint unless they're a registered user. You can even lock it down more, and you can add an API key that gets passed from CloudFront, which means it never gets seen by the front end to your Cognito. So the only way to access it is from within the app, by an authorized user. So that means even if they somehow got a token, they'd have to still be in the app to hit your endpoint. So there's a lot of ways to lock it down pretty thoroughly. And also you can lock down by regions. You can do all kinds of things. You can say, oh, I only want people in the US to be able to access my app, and that's it. And it won't allow them if they're not in the US.
Cool.
Yeah.
The Amplify, is that an AWS project or?
Yes, it's an open source AWS project.
Okay.
Yeah, they're pretty active. I mean, if you can talk to people that do it and stuff like that.
That's pretty cool.
They're very responsive. I know they're coming out with some new features. I've talked to some of the people, like they're going to allow a feature where you can say add database and allow you to add relational databases to your GraphQL endpoints, which is a huge bonus because it's really a pain to manually hook everything up. Because you basically have to write all the resolvers yourself, handwrite them. You can do it from like the console or CloudFormation or something like that, but the resolvers are kind of a pain to write. Where's the resolvers here? I'll show you what it is as soon as I find them. Oh, there we go, resolvers. So here's a resolver, and we've got like 100 of them or something. So you don't want to handwrite that. Not fun if you can avoid it. And some of the stuff is I mean, this is for NoSQL, so it's a little different. Like the resolver for using SQL is some of them are just like select star, like list users, select star from users, like not very hard to do. But you get into more complicated things, and it becomes a pain real quick, like subscriptions and whatever, things like that. It's just like, okay, what do I even do with this? Or update some complicated table. For example, you might have some big table, and I don't know, it's just kind of a pain. So it'd be nice to, obviously, auto-generated code is a lot more fun. But yeah, so adding a feature to add, so you can say add database, and you can select an Aurora relational database, and it'll do the resolvers for you, and create all the GraphQL and all the queries, mutations, whatever you define. You can have it created. That's the plan. They're also working more on the authentication. There's definitely some weaknesses in that when you're using certain types of identity. Not so much when you're just using email and password, but we use identity providers, and it's got some issues with some identity providers where it's just not as nicely integrated and kind of a pain to deal with sometimes. So they're working on like integrating that stuff better. And then they've got there's a few different parts. And they've got RDS API connections for GraphQL still in beta too. So once that comes out, then it's like going to be a legit thing. But right now, as the thing says, in beta, may change any time. So you can't really implement it in a production environment because if they change it, you're screwed. And we actually had to go down over Christmas for a sample. It wasn't a production thing. We were just doing a proof of concept, and it went down over Christmas, and no one was around till the new year. Or, I don't know if they weren't around, but it didn't get fixed till like January 2nd or something. But yeah. All right. So anything else? All right. So that's it.